All right, this video is for the lesson 2.6 homework. We're still doing domain and range. Today, though, we're looking at quadratics, all quadratics, okay? So Friday was linears, straight lines. You can tell it's a quadratic because one of the x's is going to have an exponent of 2 on it. If you see an exponent of 2, you're probably looking at a quadratic. So same process that we did Friday. If they give us an equation, we're going to graph it. But these are a little bit different. Quadratics look different. So we've got x squared plus 4x minus 5. Okay? The one thing that stays the same, if they give you the entire equation like they did here, and we can look at the picture, look at our graph, we've got something like this. Ooh. So the one thing that stays the same is the domain. If they're giving us the whole equation, okay, no specifications like the next one does, then the domain is all real numbers. I can plug any x in there that I want to. The one that's a little bit different is the range, because these bottom out. They're either going to bottom out and have a low point, or they're going to top out and have a high point if they're going upside down like this. So if it's a u, everything is going to be greater than that value. And we can find that value, and the calculator makes it really easy. So in a u graph, that's called a minimum. It's the lowest point on your graph. And so if you do min u, and then 6, and then number 2 says minimum, and you get this little dotted line, you have to capture the minimum. So I want to go to the left of that lowest point and click, and then drag over, and you can see the words pop up, minimum, and you can see an ordered pair pop up. But you want to capture that minimum, and it puts that point on your graph. So the point is -2, -9. Which of those numbers do you think I need? Because we're talking about range, so we want the y. So if my minimum is at -2, -9, and I'm talking about range, I want that one. So are all my y values, that's my up and down, are they greater than -9, or are they less than -9? They're greater than. And remember what I told you Friday, if your point that you're using is in the middle of the graph, you're going to use the greater than or equal to, the sign with the line underneath it. Okay? So if your point that either starts your range or ends your range is in the middle of that line, it goes all the way through it, you use the sign with the line underneath it. And then it's just that value. Okay? So if we've got one like the next one, find the range of the following equation given the domain. So I want to graph it before I do anything else. So I've got -x squared plus 6x minus 2. So now this one's a frown. This one goes upside down. We want the range, but it gives me this specific here. So I want to look at the table. And so I have an x value of 0 and an x value of 6. I'm going to go to where x is 0 first. When x is 0, y is a -2. And then I go to where it says 6. So when x is 6, y is a -2. That one just happens to be the same. They're not always the same. The reason I wrote them up here first is because, remember, they have to be in numerical order from least to greatest. And that's not right, because that one should be a 7. Did I type it in wrong? Plus 6x minus 2. Let's see. Yeah, -x squared plus 6x minus 2. Yeah, they shouldn't be the same number. I don't know how I got a 7. There's a 7 there. So let's go with that. Let's change it. Let's go from 0 to 3. Let's put a 3 there. All right, so the sign that's next to that x value is the same sign you use for this number. Okay, so it would be -2. Keep that sign. Range, so I'm going to use a y. This sign again, and then a 7. So if it said, I'm just going to flip this on the back. Use this same graph. If it said my domain is from 3 is less than or equal to x, and then less than, pick another value here, 7. Do it this way. So when x is 3, y is 7. When x is 7, y is -9. So when I would go to write the range for this one, I start with the smallest value. So I'm going to write the -9 first, and I'm going to use this sign. Because if the 7 is next to this sign, it means the -9 has that sign as well. Then a y for range, and now I use this one. You have to flip it sometimes. That's what makes those tricky. On the linears, it just gave us a list. Gave us 5 x values, and we wrote down the 5 y values. If it gives it to you like this, you've got to be real particular, real meticulous, and write it down how you go. All right. So from a table, tables are a little bit easier. It's like the ordered pairs, if they had given us the ordered pairs. Okay? There's 2 ways that they phrase these those. It says the table shows some ordered pairs that belong to quadratic function f. Find the domain and range of f. That means we want to find the domain and range of the entire function. Okay? So if we've got an entire function, one way that you can do this, so another cool thing that your calculator does, this box right here, it's called list and spreadsheets. I can graph individual points. So what I do in list and spreadsheets, where the A is, I put an X. Where the B is, I put a Y. And then I can type these X values in, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And then I can type the Y values in, -1, -7, -9, -7, -1. So I can turn this page into a graph. And I do that doing Control and Doc, and then it's this one, Data and Statistics. And then I can click. So here's my graph, but I got to tell it what's what. So remember, the left and right is always the x-axis, and then the up and down this way is always the y, and it graphs those points for me. And I can look. I do better if I can see what's going on. So if we're talking about the entire function, what's my domain going to be? If I look at the whole graph and I connect those dots, it's going to look something like that. It's going to look like a quadratic. So what's my domain on the entire function of a quadratic? It's going to be all real numbers. Because that's what it wants. It wants the domain and range of f. That's the entire function. That means the entire line, the entire shape. So the range, again, if we look at our picture, we're going to have a low point. What's the lowest y value listed in that table? -9. So if this point here is at 3, -9, are all my y values greater than -9 or less than -9? So y is going to be greater than or equal to -9. So that's one way they can phrase a table. If it says find the domain and range of f, it wants the entire shape of the graph. Or they could say something like this. Find the domain of just the values in the table. So domain is X, and if they want just the values in the table, it's like what we did on Friday. We just make a list of those values. So again, two ways they like to phrase that. If it says find the domain and range of f, the entire function. Just the table, it's going to be a list. Okay. So this one is real similar to this one. So I've got a graph and I've got arrows at both ends. I know it's hard to see, but they're arrows at both ends. What is the domain if we have a graph and there's arrows at both ends? All real numbers. Does this have a high point or a low point? High point? Low point. So my lowest y value is 2. Are the rest of the y values greater than or less than? Greater than. So y is going to be greater than or equal to, because it's in the middle of the line, 2. All right, I'm going to go down to 9, but we're going to find the domain and range both of 9. Just because we haven't done one that's tipped upside down like this. All right, so first off, it says we're going to do the domain first. Let me zoom in so y'all can see up here a little bit better what's going on. Ooh, blurry. A little bit better. Okay. Domain. Is domain X or Y? X. So the rest of these graphs have dots. So if I have dots, I'm going to follow the dots to the x-axis. So what's my smallest x there? Does my sign get a line underneath it? Solid dot, line underneath it. We're talking about domain. So that's x. What's my biggest x value? 0. So if it hits right here on this, it's 0. Does my sign get a line underneath it? It's an open circle, so we get a 0. So if we do the range of this one, what's my biggest y value on this graph? Biggest. Okay, so this graph, here's the biggest, and then the smallest is here. So -3 is my biggest. Does my sign get a line underneath it? The dot's in the middle of the graph, so it gets the line underneath it. This is range, so it's y. And then we said my smallest value is a -7. Does this sign get a line underneath it? But I got an open circle there, so who do you think wins in that case? A solid dot or an open dot? Solid dot wins. So if you have 2 points like this at the same value, solid dot always wins. If they're both open, no line underneath it. But if one's solid, it gets the line underneath it. Yep.
I thought you always put in a history.
You do. Thank you. So we're going to switch that around. Thank you for saying that. So we would do -7, -3. Okay. So that only leaves you 2 graphs to do. Graphs are usually what show up on the EOC. Okay? So, on the top graph, you're going to do domain and range. So the X and the Y. And then on number 2, you're going to do just the range, just the Y value. And then I'm done with you for the day.